You're the guy people call when they need a helping hand, moving furniture, unloading a truck. But lately, your shoulder's been acting up, and you're the one who's calling for help. And that's the moment you realize you can no longer shoulder the load.
The Joint and Spine Center is Cincinnati's leading destination for orthopedic care, with a range of surgical and non-surgical treatments. So when a moment has the power to change the rest of your life, go to the one place with the power to change it for the better, the Christ Hospital Health Network. This changes everything.
The Pound This Podcast is brought to you by the Christ Hospital Health Network. This is the Pound This Podcast, episode 714, Trainer Talk, Exercise Before and After Pregnancy with Leah and Nick.
I want to lose weight, but I don't know how to get started.
What should I meal prep every week?
How do I get those sweet booty gains?
Inspiration for your healthy lifestyle. The Pound This Podcast with Amanda Valentine.
Thank you so much for listening to the Pound This Podcast. I'm Amanda Valentine, and this is Trainer Talk with personal trainers and coworkers Leah and Nick. How are you guys?
Wonderful.
Fantastic.
Yay. Those are the correct answers.
Check.
So I wanted to have a conversation about training and exercise through pregnancy because I came to you guys a couple weeks ago where one of my clients here at Cincy 360 Fitness told me like, hey, we're pregnant. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's amazing. Oh, do I need to train somebody differently? I know when I got my personal training certification that was part of the course is to know how to train pregnant women, but there was like 2 seconds of information in that. And that's something where I'm like, well, that doesn't really help me right now. So, and I'm sure there's plenty of women that could be pregnant right now, plan on getting pregnant or postpartum and dealing with wanting to get into an exercise routine. So I kind of want to cover all of that of, I'm just at the stage now where my client's like, hey, we just, we're at the stage we can tell people we're pregnant, hooray. And so for me as a trainer, I'm like, okay, so how do I start training a pregnant woman? And I guess I'm just going to throw that question out first to you guys. I mean, I'm assuming you've both trained pregnant women before, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And Leah, you've been pregnant before.
I have. It was a long, long time ago.
And Nick, your wife has been pregnant before.
Yes.
So it's like we have lots of experience here. So I guess just the broad sweep question of just like, how do you start an exercise routine with a pregnant woman?
Would you like to go first?
Sure. So I guess similar to what we were talking about the other day when it comes to, the aging population, I think they can do a lot more than I think we give them credit for.
Okay.
Initially, I think us as personal trainers, though we should be cautious because they're, growing another human, there's a lot of things that they can do. I would start off with a movement assessment, just like I would start off with anybody else, and see what they're capable of, take them through the main functions of the human body. Again, what are the squat and the lunge and the hinge and the push and the pull and the carry, the gait, and see how they work with those. Obviously, the one obvious piece of the puzzle that you want to make sure that you're not doing is laying them directly on the stomach. And then I've heard
at any point during pregnancy?
That's what I've heard, and I don't know if what you've heard is differently.
I think it varies from individual to individual, and I feel like, early on you're okay in that area, but obviously as things start to grow and get bigger, then that's something that you want to avoid. So
it seems almost impossible at some point.
100%.
Just lay on your stomach without rolling over.
100%. It is no longer possible. You are correct.
Unless you have that little tool that, I think, pregnancy massage places, they have like a little like rounded area for the belly to slip into so women can lay on their back so you can really work on, their lower back and that kind of a thing.
Yep.
But the other one you want to consider is laying them flat on their back. Now, I've heard mixed things on this too. The woman that I'm training right now is pregnant. Her doctor says that she's fine as long as she's not uncomfortable. She can be laid flat on her back. There's other doctors that I've heard recommend not to do so.
Okay.
Is that the case?
I've heard the same, and I've heard at certain times as well. So, 20 weeks on, maybe avoid being flat on your back. But I think the most important thing to say as we begin this conversation, is that we as personal trainers have a certain scope of practice, and no matter what anyone's experiences, their doctor is the first person that should be involved in any discussion about their exercise.
Yeah.
So women with their OBGYNs or their midwives or their family practitioner or whoever, as soon as they are aware of their pregnancy, need to be discussing that with their doctors, and then coming to us and saying, oh, here's what they recommend. And, we can kind of go back on our experience and like Nick said, everybody's different.
Yeah.
So I think, but that's like kind of step one is, what does your doctor say?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's involved in the assessment. Obviously, the first thing that you go through is you ask them, okay, what has your doctor cleared you for? And more times than not, it's, they trust that a trainer's going to know what to do besides X, Y, Z. You know what I mean? Stay away from this. Besides that, you're clear to go kind of thing.
And so from there, I would say that probably I would just assume, as a woman who's never been pregnant, that you think, okay, I'm pregnant. Especially I think with the first time pregnancy, you would be kind of like weary of like, oh, I don't want to do anything too much. So then what, other than you just think like, well, I'm just going to walk on the treadmill. Like, what kind of strength training is there? Is there anything to be like concerned about? Or is it just, again, according to your doctor, if everything is, hey, you can do what you need to do, can you still do all of those quote unquote normal sort of exercises you're thinking of without injuring yourself or the baby?
I think that you should start with, where is the person beginning from? So, you have a client that you've been working with, you've been training, and same with you, Nick. So these are people that they've been exercising.
Yeah.
You know what they're capable of, right?
Yes.
From kind of the starting point. And so you can say, well, you're doing these things, and as long as your doctor is giving you clearance to continue doing these things, then for the most part, obviously on a case-by-case basis, you can continue doing those things.
Okay.
So I think it's important to note that this is not the time to start a brand new, like, I'm gonna strength train 4 days a week.
Yeah.
And it's like, where are you starting? Where are you at right now? What are you doing normally? Are you walking 4 days a week and strength training 2 days a week, and then all of a sudden you're pregnant? Great. I would say keep doing those things unless there's some reason not to.
Yeah.
So I think you have to kind of look at everybody as like, where are they right at the beginning of their pregnancy? What have they been doing so far?
And then where would you say that you would take it from there? Because I know you have the article in front of you that I just read talking. I mean, this makes a ton of sense. You think of so much core work, which makes sense with pregnancy. And that's where my brain would go too, of like, yes, we can work in all these other strength training things of depending on where you're at. But it feels like that's where, so many women are concerned about the stretch marks and, then not being able to quote unquote bounce back or whatever. But I think that, and according to the article, you had the study that showed that the women that exercised and worked on their core during pregnancy had so much better results post-pregnancy. So then you're not trying to like play catch up of after like, oh, my muscles have got kind of shot here for a second. Let's try to fix them of like, no, let's do this work up until that point.
Up until that point. And Nick, I know you work a lot with your clients on, things like belly breathing and activating the transverse abdominus, which is really what is kind of at the core of this article. Have you been working with your current pregnant client?
Yeah, so currently I'm training one woman that is pregnant and then another woman who has had twins, and that was, I guess, about a year and a half ago, but she hadn't done a whole lot of lifting since then. And both of those women, everybody I think needs to learn how to belly breathe and know how to activate the deep tissues of the core. But even more so with pregnant women and postpartum women, it's going to be really, really important to do that, because there's, number one, there's such a high rate of pelvic floor dysfunction, as well as What is the condition called where the rectus abdominis splits?
So and I always say it wrong, which is, so I'm going to put on my glasses and read it here. So it's Diastasis Recti Abdominis.
Okay.
Or DRA. And so this is when the outer layer, the overstretched outer layer of your rectus abdominis, which is your stomach muscles, you know, when people talk about a 6-pack or an 8-pack or a 4-pack or whatever kind of pack you have, they basically stretch apart. They separate during pregnancy because, as you can visualize, you're kind of growing a watermelon-sized balloon in your abdominal cavity. And as everything stretches out, those muscles push apart. And so what happens with a lot of people is after they give birth, then they're left with a separation between your two sides of your rectus abdominis. So the diastasis rectus affects most women, and working on the transverse abdominis, which are the deeper core muscles that can help kind of speed the recovery of them going back together, and also make the separation not as great when it does happen, because it's inevitably going to happen, you know, unless you deliver early or you just, you know, it's just a thing that happens. So, but people can be left. I mean, obviously we're on a podcast, you can't see the picture, but people can be left with a pretty large gap between their stomach muscles, and working on that control and that, you know, deep tissue contractions can really help minimize that. So diastasis rectus abdominis.
Yes, that's why I left that to you to say.
There you go.
But, you know, like you were saying, if you work on those deep tissue core muscles, the transverse abdominal, and, you know, the diaphragm and those deep tissue muscles, it can definitely help. But also in reverse, if you don't know how to properly activate those muscles, you can actually worsen the effects. So I've heard of some cases where women develop this after pregnancy or during pregnancy, and then, you know, they get cleared after they have their baby to start working out again. Somebody tells them they need to work on their core muscles. They don't know how to properly engage the deep tissues, and they just are crunching and reverse crunching and doing these exercises that you think of when you think of working your core. You're working the big muscles, and you're creating even more space because you're creating a lot of intra-abdominal pressure. And that can be, other people can get it too. Like it's not just pregnant women. Like I've had, you know, my dad actually has a mild case of it just from heavy lifting and not breathing properly for however many years he's been doing that. You can create that separation.
I also had that from my weight, and that was corrected for me whenever I had skin removal surgery. In order to remove my skin, they had to cut all of my muscles and basically kind of put everything back together, because that's exactly what mine did, just from being obese. And I've never been pregnant, and I had never known what core work meant other than just doing a bunch of crunches and not knowing if you're doing crunches or sit-ups correctly, and you're just kind of whipping into the motion that you think you got to do to muscle through it. And then, it obviously didn't really help me. Surgery had to help me. And then post-surgery is when I started going to the gym and learning more. So I think that's just, you just don't know if you don't know. And when you think of core work, you think of just whipping into a bunch of crunches without any sort of form or knowledge behind it. And then you get frustrated that you don't have a 6-pack, then it's time to, dig a little deeper and do some of those things, which I personally don't have a ton of fun with, doing all of the breathing exercises.
No one does.
So it's like, but then, you kind of got to pick your poison here of like, kind of sit through and do these breathing exercises and learn how to engage your core in the correct ways. Or just continue to do this other thing that's really not getting you anywhere. So you're just like, well, am I going to just keep going through emotion and getting no results from it, or worsening the problem, like you said, Nick, or do I need to kind of hone in and focus on the correct way to do those things, whether you're pregnant or not? And I think that's just a whole conversation with health in general that we have with ourselves of what are we willing to do and spend the time on or not.
Yep.
But
I think that's best case scenario, right? If you're planning to get pregnant, start working on these things now, because the sooner you can get these correct patterns, these correct, engagements, the easier it's going to be when you are pregnant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In a similar way, I did a podcast with a urology gynecologist from Christ Hospital several months ago, and we talked all about pelvic floor and specifically post-pregnancy, because she's just like, everyone has some sort of pelvic dysfunction and you have to work on it. She's like, and most women just think of like Kegels and do these like stoplight Kegels. I don't know if you know what I'm aware. I don't know if you know, Nick.
I listen to the podcast. So yeah, I know.
So
you're up on it.
Right? So, but then like people are doing those wrong too, of what your idea of what you think a Kegel is versus these pelvic floor exercises that are actually creating the change that you want. And I think that's why people do come to their doctor or come to a personal trainer of like, show me the right way to do these things so I don't spend so much time and energy wasting on something that's not only not working, but could possibly cause me harm. So I guess from both of your perspectives as a trainer, if somebody's like, okay, yes, I understand I have to do this deeper core work, like what exercises are you running them through other than breathing?
Well, I mean, I think the part of the belly breathing, and it's hard to describe it, on a podcast, but part of the belly breathing and the activating of the transverse abdominis that I'll try to work on here is, I mean, as simple as lying on the floor and, first, and I will preface this by saying that I'm also a yoga teacher. So we actually did this a lot in yoga. And so, side note, anybody who wants to do some yoga, please do. So laying on the floor and basically, can you feel your belly inflate and deflate while you're breathing? So, just the simple act of laying down, putting your hands on your belly. And when you inhale, filling it up like a balloon. And then when you exhale, pressing it down and feeling it deflate, you'd be surprised at the number of people that can't do that. Yeah. And that's like kind of the basic starting point of activating your inner, deeper core muscles. So it's like, if you can do that a couple times, feel it rise, feel it fall. But then if you can inflate, hold that inflation feeling and activate your abdominal muscles, that's really the activation of your transverse abdominis. And that's kind of, just what some of these recommendations are, is learning how to do that so that when you're then postpartum, even a week postpartum, you can do that. It's not so many women, and again, doctors, right? They're going to give you the best advice, but they're told don't do anything for 6 weeks. And, studies have shown that the biggest improvements come in those first few weeks when you're postpartum, if you can simply activate some of these muscles. We're not saying get up and do some squats. Yeah. We're saying lay down on the floor and practice belly breathing and practice, reactivating your abdominal muscles. And that's something that you can do right away. But I think we're scared a lot of the times because it's so like, okay, you're going to come back for your 6-week appointment and I don't want you to drive and I don't want you to move and I don't want, only pick up your baby. And, and there's just all these things that are just like red flag. And it's like, no, you can
breathe.
Especially, yeah, you can breathe. You can lay on the floor and breathe and activate, your stomach muscles. So it's like, it's really just starting with that. Like that is your basic go-to. And then, go from there.
Going to get back to pregnancy chat here in a second. Want to take a minute and talk to you about my own health coach, Sarah, and Team Fit With Me. If you're struggling with your goals, whether that's health, fitness, weight loss, you have maybe some gut health conditions, thyroid diseases, PCOS, hormonal dysfunctions, or you just need some blood work and some labs and see what the heck's going on, or you just need some general information and learning nutrition and macros and your own fitness, highly recommend Team Fit With Me. They do one-on-one nutrition coaching. They have meal plan add-on options available. They have a registered dietitian look through all of that. Again, like I said, the labs, that's how I found out how I have Hashimoto's disease, was doing these labs with Sarah. Plus, there's a food relationship coach partner with Team Fit With Me. She's been on this podcast, absolutely amazing. And right now you can get 10% off month 1 of all packages, plans, and add-on services at teamfitwithme.com/poundthis. So if you're in need of a health coach or you just want to ask some questions, hit up Sarah and Team Fit With Me. Absolutely amazing. Again, teamfitwithme.com/poundthis for that 10% off month 1. You can find that link in the show notes.
And I think that's all really good stuff. It's just some of the cues that I try to give people when I'm trying to get them to engage the TVA or the transverse abdominal. When you're laying on the floor, like you said, I think that's typically the easiest place for somebody to feel it is laying on their back on the floor, on their stomach on the floor, but probably not if you're pregnant, laying on your stomach. But if you're laying on your back, you kind of put your hands on the area that you would think of as like your belt line. So if you're wearing a belt, right in that area, and then as you get that breathing pattern down, like Leah was saying, inflate as you inhale and deflate as you exhale. As you're exhaling, pull that down towards your spine, right? And some of the cues I give people are, pretend that somebody's trying to poke you in the stomach and you're trying to avoid them poking you, right? You're pulling your stomach away from somebody's finger. I know it sounds kind of weird, but the other one I say is, you're in a cold body of water and a cold wave just hits you in the stomach. You can kind of pull it in, right? And what you're not trying to do is you're not trying to muscle through the big muscles on the outside. So if you feel the larger muscles, the ones that you consider your six pack, the rectus abdominis, if you feel that start to really tense up, you're trying too hard. You want to be a little bit more relaxed than that and pull that down deep. And those are the muscles that you're trying to engage. And then once you're able to engage those, that's when you take somebody into a more complex core exercise, or we can start moving into side crunches. I think is really good for probably pregnant women because they're not going to be moving forward and back. They're going to be working on the obliques a little bit more. I like to do a lot of chops and lifts, whether it be with a cable or a core ball, or just have somebody on one knee and kind of balance on one knee. I think that can be really helpful. Things like suitcase carries, just walking, having somebody walk back and forth with a kettlebell in one hand, so it offsets their balance a little bit, and they're forced to engage their core. Those are all really good ones. I'm not really big into, crunching forward. I don't want a lot of spinal flexion in that instance. Honestly, not even for most people, unless their goal is I want to build my six pack muscles, and you feel like everything else is already there. They have an idea of how to engage everything else. Would I say go ahead and do crunches or reverse crunches? When you really need to get all these other muscles activated before we go into anything like that.
And this is a total side note tangent, but I want to touch on while you're there, because you're talking about people that want to just purposely work on like those six pack muscles, that I think it's important to note that so many people find frustration that they're not seeing that ab definition, but understanding that it's not always necessarily just crushing those muscles. It's a body fat percentage, and it's what your body fat level is, and also your genetics. Of some people, you just aren't going to see that definition. So I just feel like so many people, men and women, go into this cycle of like, I want to see abs and get kind of crazed, and then do 1,000 crunches a day and do all of those things because you hear like, oh, I'm going to do a suitcase carry, or I'm going to breathe. And most people are like, that ain't working it out. That's not getting me a six pack. But know that there's so many different factors that come into play, and the amount of work that goes into that. I don't know. I've just seen so many people get frustrated and then just quit altogether and be like, well, I did 1,000 crunches a day for a month and I don't see abs, so I'm never going to work out again.
But what are you eating?
I mean, abs are made in the kitchen.
Abs are made in the kitchen. I mean, it's so true. And, we're sold this false bill of goods by the media that, abs are so easy to get.
Right.
Because, all you see are models and actors and influencers and all these people with these ripped, cut abs, and it's like, one, editing, two, that's their job, and 3, it's like that, it's just not real life. So it's like, if we could get that out of our brains, but also, what are you eating? I mean, that's.
Well, I think the rest of your body and the way that's structured too, right? Like I think people think, oh, I'm just going to go in and just work my abs and think that that's going to get them somewhere. Right. And you really have to have a really good round full body routine. And most people that have a six pack are, have some sort of athletic background, or just a very low body fat percentage to start. And you think for men, usually you start seeing that around 12% body fat. So you have to be pretty low, really lean, not just lean with low body fat, but also have a good amount of muscle mass underneath there to be able to see that.
Well, I also think it's important to know that it's also pretty unrealistic to maintain that 365 days a year. That usually those people that you're seeing online posting, that, again, it's their job, or it's a season where they're there, and then you take a butt ton of photos and you just use those forever while you actually behave like more normal and eating different amounts. And, you know, again, everybody's different, but it's just, again, one of those things of the perception versus the reality. You know, as we're talking about abs and core, I know that just kind of, everybody kind of has that in their head. And I think especially if you're post-pregnancy, realizing that you also like have another set of obstacles against you. And I would say that this is even probably, again, I'm not a doctor, but, you know, just as important, if not more important, I would imagine, if you had a C-section. So you did have muscles cut, and whenever you're healed and you're able to, then also you're kind of retraining muscles that were cut and re-sewn in a different way, and you're coming at this from that perspective of your body is not only changed from childbirth, but is changed from surgery.
Yeah, 100%. And for some people, they don't get feeling back. You know, I mean, some people have a C-section and they have a scar, and then, you know, I've had clients and friends say, you know, oh yeah, it's just kind of like dead there. Like I can't really feel, you know, and so then you have to even be more intuitive in, you know, your mind muscle connection, right? Because if you can't necessarily feel like when you're touching it with your hands or your finger, you know, it's like, okay, well, how am I going to get you then to now, like, okay, let's go from the inside out and, you know, try to activate and pull in and, you know, and it just, you have to take your time, you know, right? We all want our instant gratification, and, you know, you have to take your time and do those things that aren't as glamorous and fun.
But you will be amazed at the consistency of it, how much you will start to develop that mind muscle connection. Like I went through this when I had my hernia surgery, you know, not the same as a C-section, but, you know, similar idea where you're cutting open the abdominal wall, and then you're trying to retrain it to do what it did before, and you're taking it really slow. But, you know, I feel like that was one of the reasons maybe that I did get a hernia in the first place, was because I didn't have great control of those lower core muscles, not realizing it, thought I did, but maybe didn't. And, you know, still to this day, probably twice a day I lay on the ground and just focus on my breath and focus on activating my TVA. And it's amazing how much connection I have there. Like before I really had to fish around for it and really have to like think about hard. And now I just do it very easily without needing to think too much about it.
No, and I love that you brought that up, because I think a lot of people have a false perception that just being a personal trainer as a job means that you're perfect at all of those things and you can feel everything, and you must have this.
Not.
Yeah, right. You do this all day, and so, but it's for you to be like, you know, I thought I had this at a certain level, and be like, but I learned a lot through this, and I'm, you know, you're continuing to learn, and now you're spreading that knowledge onto other people. I think is super important. Again, in a social media world where people are posting six packs and acting like, yeah, I know all the answers. I'm perfect at this, to be like, no, I'm learning my own body, and we all are. So it's how, you know, for people to be like, I'm not an expert at this, I'm not really good at this, and I'm not even going to try because I don't even know it. Like we're all coming from a place of learning, especially learning our own bodies, because every minute of the day we're a little bit older and we're changing constantly, and you have to realize you're changing constantly with your body. So maybe where you were with, you know, your abdominals before was suited to you at a younger age, and as you age, things just change, and now you have to change and adapt with it. And I think that that's also something that gets into our heads, you know, just even from an aging fitness perspective of thinking of like, well, I used to do this back then, and my body should be able to do this now. I used to be able to run a half marathon of it, you know, and then you just try to cram this, you know, square peg into a round hole. And I imagine the same thing would happen with pregnancy, is my pre-pregnant
100%.
body can do this. It should be able to do this now, and I'm just going to punch it until it happens.
And that is so true. And I can tell you from experience, I mean, my daughter is 19, so I was pregnant a very long time ago. And it was also before I was a personal trainer, although I did exercise and I did work out. But so funny enough, the only time I ever sought out a personal trainer was after I had my daughter. And I went to a big box place and basically talked to this guy. I think I talked to him once or twice. And, he's like, well, what's your goal? And I was like, to fit back in my jeans. And he's like, okay. And I think he took me through like one workout or something. And I was like, this guy doesn't get me. Like he doesn't, like it didn't really work. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm on my own. I guess I'm going to figure out, what. And I think I really just started walking. Like I started walking a lot more and just like moving my body more. And like, but I was very frustrated because I had gone from being, in shape and fit and, thin. And then like 2 months after having a baby, I was like, what the heck is this? I mean, and I really was like, this is not what I signed up for, but it was hard. And it took a long time to get back to where I wanted to be. And ultimately I just kind of did my own thing, but it was just because I didn't really feel like I was being, met with the vibe that I was seeking out. I don't know, with that particular person. But I think that just goes back to, I probably wasn't communicating enough either. So like I would say, if you have a pregnant client or somebody tells you they're pregnant, like talk to that, like try to just like, this is not the time as a pregnant client to like not tell us all the things. Like we need all the information. So it's like, if you come in, I feel like we're all very good when our clients come in. It's the first thing we say is like, how are you feeling today? Be honest. Yeah. Especially if you're pregnant, like be honest. Oh, I'm feeling really fatigued today. I'm here. I want to do something, but I'm just really tired. Great. Thanks for letting me know. We're going to scrap what I had on this piece of paper right here and work on this instead. Yeah. I just think that's a huge key.
Yeah, I think that's probably important for all of us to just stop being a bully to ourselves and be honest of like, hey, I'm not on top of my game today, instead of trying to muscle through it. And it just feels like I would imagine being pregnant would be, you probably flip-flop back and forth between being like, oh God, take care of me, and like, no, I got this, I'm Superwoman. And so it's just kind of finding that.
Absolutely. So like being honest with yourself, and then being honest with your trainer or your doctor or your acupuncturist or your massage or whoever you're talking to, but just like give the real story. Yeah. Tell us the real truth of how you're feeling, that day.
Yeah. So, that's all awesome advice. I would, imagine that people listening to this, if there are any sort of, I think that the core work is important, whether you're pregnant or not, or postpartum. And I know that, that probably should be its own podcast topic, and just go
get Josh down here for that.
I'm sure you would want to talk about that. You guys get all geeked about core stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, and especially when you're talking about postpartum women, you got to think like their organs have completely shifted.
Yeah.
Like, I think people don't, number one, society's too hard on pregnant women or women that have had babies, and because of that, they're too hard on themselves. They feel like they have to bounce back super quick.
Correct.
And you just have to realize like how much changes. Your hormones are different. Your organs are different. Because of the hormone change, you have now your ligaments in your body have stretched out, and everything, your feet get wider because the ligaments are stretched. Like there's so much that's involved, and you have to be kind to yourself and have to be gentle as when you first come in from having a baby. You just want to be, start off with the breathing and go from there, basically.
So with the female clients that you've had that have gone through the point of pregnancy, and you've seen them after they had the baby, is it harder are they still in a different mindset, or are they pretty receptive to like, no, I'm cool with just doing some breath work and let's go at this slow? Or is it more the mentality of like, no, beat my ass because I got to get rid of this baby body?
I had one woman that was particularly like, I just want my body back. Like that's kind of what her mentality was the whole time. But I think most of the time women are pretty understanding that like, okay, you just basically went through a surgery. Essentially, you know what I mean? And not just the actual delivery part, but, grew baby or babies in your stomach for 9+ months. Things are a little bit different, and they're pretty understanding of that.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think it just, again, person to person, I would say the few people that I've had that have have come back in after giving birth, definitely had the mindset of, okay, I'm going to slow my roll a little bit.
Yeah.
And I wasn't necessarily able to do all the things that I used to do. And so I understand that I have to build myself back up.
Yeah.
You can't go through all of that. And then if you were at a 9, come right back in and start back up at a 9. You got to go back down to 3 or 4 and work your way back up. And I think that's part of it. Part of that is our job too, to just, we need to be gentle. We need to, yes, I know you were squatting 115 pounds when you left, but now we're going to start with body weight.
Yeah. Or I imagine even if somebody that's not exercising beforehand, and I mean, that, could use pregnancy, which I'm sure plenty of people do. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't do this either. Be like, I'm eating for 2, YOLO. So be like, I'm eating blooming onions every day. And so then it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm pregnant, so I'm going to enjoy the pregnancy, and I'm going to, we're doing all of that. And then it's like, I'll worry about doing the exercise and all that stuff whenever the baby's here.
Right.
And then the baby's here. And then it's kind of like, okay, now let's get started. And I imagine that's just got to be a whole nother mindset too, because not only did you push off that conversation of exercising your body until the baby was here, but now you're dealing with everything you pushed off, and you're also raising a human.
Yeah. It's one of those things that no matter what anybody tells you, you're never fully prepared for it.
Yeah.
So that's just, you have to understand that. You can read every book and every blog and every website and everything. And until you are, in your home, especially alone with that baby, and you're like, oh, what do I do with this thing? And then, by the way, I don't fit in any of my clothes. It's a lot. And it just goes back to what we said about being gentle with yourself and being kind to yourself, and not knowing that it's not all going to happen at day 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that realizing too, if that is how you spent your pregnancy, to just not shame yourself about it. Be like, oh, I should have exercised through this whole thing of if you didn't, that's what it is. And we're dealing with where we are now.
Where you are now.
Don't trash yourself
Start
for
where you
whatever.
are now.
Can't change the past.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So I feel like that would be, I don't know. I just could feel like that's, or at least definitely past versions of me that would have done that. Been like, okay, yeah, it's like time to just, I don't care. And then be like, oh God, what did I create for myself? Right. So I feel like, again, everything can go at your own pace. And I feel like that goes into weight loss too, of like, oh my God, I hopped on a scale, and how did I let things get here? And it's just so overwhelming. I'm not going to do anything to just, one step. Again, we can all focus on breathing. If that's all it is just laying down and breathing. And I think that's also very meditative too.
100%.
Especially you're going to need some of that post baby to see it as me time, and not see it as like I need my body to look a certain way, but I'm like, helps me to lift my baby and to exist and be a good mother for my baby, and also being gentle with myself and coming from that mindset rather than where them abs at.
Absolutely.
And where them abs at?
Well, they're over here and they're over here. We got to get them back together.
On that note, if anybody has any further questions about training or exercise or anything about pregnancy, I'm assuming you're cool if everybody shoots you an email, reaches out.
Of course.
Absolutely.
So I'll put those all in the show notes. And as always, thank you guys.
AmandaValentineBites.com